Hello, Culture Matters Podcast. I'm excited for this episode. Before I introduce you to our guest, here's a quote just for this episode. No matter what you do, your job is to tell your story. Gary V said that. Season 4, episode 37, our guest was on. And season 35, 416. Actually, still holds the heavyweight title of our longest episode. Very proud of that. We'll have to do a part 4 as to beat that record.
Oh, how
It's
long was that?
crazy to think. I'm sorry.
How long was it?
It was, I believe, it was 2 hours and 52 minutes of
Oh,
the
okay.
Culture with the one and only CMO leader of leaders, Jason Frazier. Thanks for coming back to this show. Yeah, you actually have the heavyweight title of the longest episode, which for the listeners that are listening, you know, as of this recording, we've released 645 as of today.
Jeez.
And so out of all those episodes, still rank longest episode. And I see that as a badge of honor. So thanks for coming back to the Culture Matters podcast. It's you, Bill Dallas, and Don Hennig. Summer 1, 2, 3. Haven't gotten past. Maybe we'll have to do part 4, invite those two people, Bill and Don, on, and we'll just do a whole 10-hour episode. But
Podcast till you drop, right? An episode till you drop, right? We'll see how we
yeah, I
get.
should say for our listener, if you don't know Jason Frazier, you should follow him. He's constantly putting out information that's going to help you if you're paying attention. Right now, if you're watching on YouTube, repping the 2020 sweatshirt and the Arte hat, two unbelievable brands who have been influential to our show. But thanks for coming back to the show, brother. This is exciting.
Well, thanks for having me, man. I enjoy our conversations, as you know. So yeah, I'm ready to rock and roll. And to the audience, don't worry, this isn't going to be 2 hours and 52 minutes. It's going to be 2 hours and 55 minutes. So like we'll do it just by a few minutes.
Yeah, I was listening to episode 416. We were talking basically about how Uh, there have been many things that were said in that previous episode in season 4 where you'd been proven right. You were almost like the squeaky wheel, saying, "Hey, listen over here. This is what's going on." And ultimately, a couple of years later, all those types of things start happening. First question I have for you is, how do you temper foresight with humility?
I think that, and that's tough, right? And I think even when you try to do that, um, sometimes that still, it still can come off the wrong way. I think one is you're either to I mean, you could be humble and not truly, you could act humble. I think anyone that knows me like you do and others that, I'm not, I'm a pretty humble guy, right? I'm not a braggart or going out there, but I think the difference with what I talk about is that it doesn't play into an agenda of mine. You know what I mean? Like I don't have like my how I look at things and how I talk. One is I don't care. Well, let me put it this way. Of course I care, but like I don't. It doesn't like if I'm wrong, I'm okay with that. But I'm not looking to like try to be looking back and say, hey, I was right about this. I've been talking about this all this time. My whole point in talking about all of that is the people that I coach and are trying to help is just that. I'm trying to coach them and help them based off of how I see things and me looking at the landscape. And I also think that my perception is a little different than most. And so just because of my background and where I came from and not being in this industry and also not drinking any dogma Kool-Aid of how the industry should or shouldn't be. Right. And so, and again, it goes back to me. I'm a pretty humble dude, but ultimately, when there's no agenda and it's rooted in truly just trying to help people and put them in the best position for success, um, it's going to be humble. You're going to have humility because there is nothing like there isn't like, hey, do all this stuff and then buy my book. You know what I mean? Like I didn't like create all. I'm not creating solutions in search of problems. You know what I mean? I see a
Mm.
lot of challenges, and I'm just trying to help people look at them differently than they may just inherently look at them, but also at the same time, try to give them, whether it's a strategy tactic or just information enough for them to be informed for when things start to happen like I say they do. You know what I mean? And I'd have to go back and listen to the episode, but it was funny. I was just at an event talking, and I mentioned how I wasn't invited back to a certain NBA event because
Huh.
I talked and I mentioned, I basically said, hey, in 36 months, all these things are going to happen. It was very anti what the room and the theme was talking about. And and I've never been invited back since, but I was right. And again, it's not like, hey, I'm great. It's great that I was right about these things. Again, it was just more of like, if you don't want to hear it, then don't ask for, you know, outliers to come on to your events and whatever. Cause at the end of the day, my customer is not lenders or anybody else. It's the individual loan officer and by extension, the consumer.
I want to share. I'll brag for you then. So, for our listeners, things that Jay was talking about years ago have made people more successful. Those that actually took action, things like putting themselves on social on a lot harder level. Not just looking at the industry the way it's always been done, but thinking outside the box, getting developing more of an audience and really taking the marketing in a different direction. People have done very well that have listened to you. It's even companies that have actually gone in that direction and we're kind of ahead of things. And I'll just say that to the
Yep.
audience. So pay attention to Jay. My question to you is today, like, okay, so we're recording this. This is going to go out in a few days. It's
Mhm.
actually election day in November. It's November, right? Yeah, it's November. What
Yep.
do you see? What do you see? We have a crystal ball. What do you see? What are some things? Well, actually, first I want to start here. What should we not be doing? Specific space, actually. What should we not be? If we're doing a list of don'ts, like don't, thou shalt not. What's some of your advice for the producers, for the entrepreneurs right now? Things to avoid right now in Q4.
Oh, well, in Q4,
Yeah,
um,
Q4, things to avoid. And then I'll go, I want to go, as
yeah,
Munger would say, invert, always invert. Let's start with what we shouldn't do first.
yeah. So, if I'm thinking about it, if I'm just thinking in the lens of the end of this year, what
Yeah, and
we
there's different
shouldn't,
avatars you could speak to, but like speak to
yeah,
the ones
yeah,
you want to speak to first, and then we can go through.
yeah. So, yeah, what I would say is, what I would say to everyone, what you can't do is fall back into the same habit of waiting for the market to move, to create action, to move for you, right? Like you need to go to the market, not let the market come to you. And what I mean by that is that, and we just saw this, and this is something I've been talking about for forever, I would say, but especially in these last 18 months, is that everyone's waiting for something to come and save them, right? And actually, Barry talked about this at NAM National in Vegas, right? He talked about like, you guys, you can't just keep doing the same old, same old. You can't wait for someone to come and save you, the market, the rates, or whatever, right? You have to create your own luck. You have to create your own success. Nobody's coming to save you, and that's something I've been talking about, like I said, pretty much forever. But in these last 18 months, is we've seen it, right? We saw the rates dip down. And what happened? What happened is what I always said happened. All of a sudden, every loan officer has energy because they have something to talk about. At least I mean, look, guys, loan officers, you always have something to talk about. The problem is that you think you only have something to talk about when there's a Fed meeting or rates move, right? Or a new program comes out or something like that. Everyone thinks that's the only time that they keep that, that they need to have that energy, right? And what I always say is like, guys, when something like that happens and you're all like all over talking about it, creating reels, doing video content, all the things that like as a coach and a marketer and just along with I'm by no means the only one in this space talking about this, but when we all collectively say the things and then see them do it, like you can do that all the time. And so what happens though is loan officers make that one-to-one correlation, whether conscious or unconscious, between something happening in the market, something that they believe all the consumers need to know. And it's simple for them to talk about rates because they're loan officers, right? Like they get into their comfort zone and then they just fall back and keeping that energy for the moment. Great. But then they lose it. And then like I see them for a couple days and then I don't, and then it's crickets. Right. And so what I would say is that what you can't do in Q4 is you can't do what you've always done, which is, okay, New Year's is going to come, markets, you guys are playing into the seasonality, right? It's almost kind of like a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? You're manifesting your lack of action, right? By waiting for something outside of your control to happen. Right. And so you can't do that. You have to take action. And so, we had our weekly success call today and we were talking about our high performance mastermind that we're having in Scottsdale in December. And, one of the panels that I put up in the deck was, guys, like no more, like just no more talking, right? Like enough webinars, enough everything, and no more like coulda, woulda, shoulda, right? Like it's the time we don't have a problem of knowledge in this industry. We have a problem of doing in this industry.
Mm.
And the problem is that most of the people that are in positions of mentorship or influence within these organizations, they come from a time and they're not actively in the trenches anymore, so they don't really know. But basically, they're trading off shit that like worked, like a decade ago or 2 decades ago, and that's great. And they're still trading off that. Fantastic. How are you going to help the new people? And this was an interesting um uh just an interesting view when I was looking at like the people that I help, because I talk to hundreds of loan officers every single month, right? Through webinars and coaching and everything else. In fact, thousands. And when it comes down to it, the people that I see having the most difficult times are the experienced, the veterans in the industry. Those are the people that I see having issues. The newer loan officers, the ones that just come in and are figuring stuff out themselves, or they happen to be, in a place that's a little bit more young and thinking and have maybe a little bit what we would call a contrarian view to this business. They're having like you know, uh, the best production year. I mean, if it's their first year, they're having great production years, right? And then I'm looking at these experienced, like 10-year vets that can't even put a loan together in 3 months, right? And yet I'm talking, I have one guy that he's literally brand new, like as brand new as you're going to get, right? And he's averaging like 5 to 6 deals a month, right? And so why? And when I talk to him, it's
Huh.
easy to see why, right? It's the mindset of like, I'm just going to go out and do what I and I'll figure it out and whatever, but I'm going to talk there, I'm going to do all these things. The other people, the experienced people are basically trading on all the shit that they've always done. And even though it's not working, they're waiting for other outside factors like the market and others to play into it to where it actually creates the action for, or creates a more an easier environment for them to do it. And it's not because they're lazy, and it's not because like they just don't want to work. It's just that's like muscle memory to them. Like they don't know how to do anything else. And of course, when there's change or something that's different, um, it takes them out of their comfort zone. They don't want to do it. And it's not again because they're lazy, it's because that's how our bodies and our brains are wired. Like we're wired to not do a lot of stuff, right? We're almost wired to be lazy, right? Because our brains don't want to expend a certain amount of energy. It's trying to keep us safe. It's trying to keep, they're like, oh, that was anxiety and that was this. So we don't want to do that again. We don't want to do anything that's like uncomfortable. And I'm sorry, but now this is an industry, or this is a market built for uncomfortable. And if you don't want to be uncomfortable, then it's going to be hard for you to succeed, not just in this market, but going forward, because what are we looking at? Rates are up, back up over 7% now. Now everyone's shutting up. No one's posting. No one's talking about anything. And one thing that, one of my contentions is I said, look, you tell me your market, I will find a loan officer that's doing deals that has worse service, worse products, and worse rates than you. And so what's your
Yeah.
excuse?
Does somebody buy a home because of the rate or because they need shelter?
Well, let me put it this way. There's a lot of different, it depends on the buyer, right? But most people, right, a majority, they buy the home. It's not it's shelter is part of it, right? Like we could
Like
break it down to that,
shelter,
but
meaning, I
it's
don't
it's
know.
the feeling of it. It's because they want that difference in their life or that change in their life, and they think the home is going to do that for them. It's not because of rate. Rates matter, obviously, like it's because of cost, right, and because of the the economic environment that we have, but they don't, like, no one wakes up thinking like, okay, rates are low, so I'm going to go buy a house because of rates. That's never the catalyst for buying a home. Albeit I will say, in during the COVID years, right, during the COVID time when rates were super low and everything, and it was just out of bounds, right, for just everything happening, we played as a message, as an industry, we played the let's make a deal messaging, right? We didn't talk about shelter or home or all the valuable things about home ownership. We talk about low rates. And then we're surprised when rates go higher that all consumers who've just been beat in the face with mailers, with ads, with phone calls, with text messages, with emails and social media thing about low rates, historically low rates. And actually, you could extend that past the COVID years if you think about the last decade, right? Like historically low rates, this historically low rates. And then when we get higher rates, everyone's like, oh, well, now all they care about is rates. Oh, well, no shit. That's all you've been talking about. That's all you've been showing is the true value to the consumer. And so you've just created your own market of rates being the number one thing. So for the consumers that bought, and there was a lot of people that had buyer's remorse, not because they didn't like want to own a house. It was because they were like, rates are low. This is a great deal. And I'm going to buy a house. And I may not love the house, but it was such a great deal, such great low rates. And I see these conversations all the time from consumers about like, hey, I'm in this house. I don't love it, but my rate's super low, my payment. So like, and I got a great, right? So that, to your point, you got to look at the reasons why people are doing it, but it's never a rate. Like that's never the driver for someone to buy or not buy.
Susie, what do you want to do when you get older? I want a rate, the right rate.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
Right.
it's
Like oh
I
yeah,
want to,
I
the
want,
white picket fence. I want the kids and the whatever, and they're not the Susie. Susie's not saying I want 4%. Susie's saying
no,
I want to become, I want a big wedding and I want to marry an astronaut and I want to.
I want to live in this neighborhood. I want to be close to shop. Like they imagine their life of what that home is the vehicle for, right? People don't, and this plays right into culture, right? Because your culture is your community, right? Like that's gonna be part
Like
of your culture.
we're always been so aligned. Us,
Hmm.
I wrote this down literally, like when you were teaching rates.
Hmm.
Rates matter if culture doesn't.
Yeah.
Like meaning that not that they maybe that's a little hyperbolic, but like
No, I get what you're
the
saying though. But yeah,
proportion of the it mattering is where there's a disconnect between meaning or value. Why, like, what's the value? Like, yeah, do they buy the shelter? What are they buying? What are we buying? What are we
yeah,
investing?
yeah. And it's like I said, to me, it all breaks down to a little bit of cult, like because if you think about it in terms of like someone who was brought up because like they didn't really have a lot of stuff or their parents struggled and they taught them certain lessons in life or whatever, but for whatever reason that their picture of home ownership is, whether it's the American dream or it's whether it's the person that grows up in a very large family. And I could give this example for me, right? Like having like Thanksgiving and having cousins and aunts and uncles and people over for that, right? I wanted a large house so that I could facilitate family coming together, right?
Yeah,
That's
cool.
part of my culture growing up, right? Like that's part of, and so you could look at that and extend that to other people of like, I want a home because I can't have family. I can, it sucks, but my 2 bedroom apartment that's 1,000 square feet. It sucks to have 20, family members over, right? Now that I'm in a 4,000 square foot house, right? It's great. And it's a better experience. And I feel more complete. And I feel that I have what I wanted, like what I've thought in my life as having a goal, as the home being a vehicle for that. And so again, it
Wow.
goes on like consumers think about what their lives are going to look like. They've already sold themselves a story, and that's what a lot of loan officers don't understand, is that when they're having the conversation, they've already sold themselves on the story of whatever home ownership happens to mean to them. A loan officer needs to figure out what the hell that story is and align themselves with that. Because if you do that, then you're going to have a customer and then a client, right? That's what's going to happen when you align yourself with the purpose of your audience. It's not rocket science, right? Or just I always like to say this for fun because everyone says that it's not brain science, right? You know what I mean? Like brain surgeon, rocket scientist. So I put
Yeah,
those two
yeah.
together just to have fun, guys. Like
Hmm.
it's not complicated,
Hmm.
right? But what if you look at all the marketing out there, a majority of it, it's going to be not to that point. It's going to be talking about the products or the features, not the benefits, right? But you don't know the benefits of your audience until you actually take the time to have conversations to figure out what the hell that is. And it's just, and guys, put on your consumer hat. There's plenty of times where you have been pulled into that because you've told yourself a story. Oh, I'm going to purchase this computer and X, Y, and Z is going to happen. I'm going to sign up for the CRM. I'm going to do this type of subscription. I'm going to get with this coaching program. I'm going to do whatever it happens to be. I'm going to buy this car, right? Whatever it is, you've already sold yourself on the story of why that matters to you. And so if I'm a good salesperson and by an extension a better marketer, like I'm already telling that story so that inevitably the trust and the authority is a given, right? And that's
I have
half
a,
the battle right there.
what do you think about this? So this is a question I have,
Mm-hmm.
like philosophically. Is the rate a means to an end or an end in itself? If it's a so what I- if it's an end in itself, it's what I assume. If it's a means to an end, it's what they want. So like is the rate a means to an end or an end in itself? So the end in itself is like I'm fixated on what I'm assuming is important because I'm so entrenched in the business. I'm the
Mm-hmm.
advisor. Like I know, I'm thinking about the difference between 4% or 5% or what. Is it
Mm-hmm.
an end in itself or is the rate a means to an end? It's like, what's the end? Well, yeah, why are they actually buying the home? What's important to them?
Yeah.
What are their
Yeah.
goals, their life goal? I'm just trying to conceptualize it. Um, is the rate a means to an end or an end in itself? I don't
Yeah.
know.
And I think
Help
that
me out with
I
this
think,
thought.
yeah. So, I mean, to me, I mean, my first answer would be it's a means to an end, right? And because the end is whatever the outcome or their dream outcome happens to be, right? Just like anything else, right? Is, like, for athletes or whoever played sports will understand that like all the practicing and all the stuff that you put yourself through, workouts and stuff like that, was a means to an end, because it's not like everyone enjoys doing all of that stuff, right?
But
Like
your
growing up.
situation, what you're saying is in the industry, it's easy to fall into it being an end in itself.
It is right, because that's all we talk about, right? But ultimately it's and that shouldn't matter to us. It really shouldn't. And people are gonna be like, you're crazy or whatever because it's the mortgage industry. I get it, but you got to understand that from a consumer standpoint, right, is that price is almost always a means to an end, right? It just is, right? Think and but when that price is tied to experience. Okay. And what do I mean by that? And the example that I always use, just because it's the easiest one, because most people can identify with this from a like overpaying, is that is there, so like, for example, a first class flight, right? I'm in the same building. I go down the same jetway. I'm in the same uh, machine in the air. I'm breathing the same, I'm everything's the same. It's the experiences that's different. I land at the same time as everyone else. right? Maybe I get off the plane a little bit quicker because I'm up front, right? But it's that experience. Now it's the difference between paying Spirit
Yeah.
for like a $69 ticket, because right, I'm just like, if my ultimate goal is to get from here to there, right? Like for $69, that's great. But instead I paid, $1,700 to sit up
Didn't
front.
want to look at the bill.
You know what I mean? Like, and we do that all the time, right? Now people are like, well, it's not the same because the houses are hundreds of I get that, but but it is absolutely the same. People will pay more for the life that they feel gives them the better experience when they can, right? Within their means. And so what I would say is that
Yes.
when we're looking at it, is that it's a means to an end, because ultimately what they want is and obviously it's not
Good
because
analogy.
you're in the plane, you get off the plane, right? The home, it's not like you get the home and then you just go get another one, right? Like that's going to be your home on average. I think that the stats now say probably about 6 years, right?
I
And
think it's a
so
great example because there are scenarios where, you're traveling a tremendous amount,
mhm,
sitting in the front versus sitting in the back. I've done both. In the front, you can get a lot more work done.
yep,
You might meet the CEO of a company that has 17,000 employees who may hire
yep,
you.
yep,
In the back, you might have a panic attack from the air. Or what, I don't know, I'm being a little dramatic, but like, I write letters on the plane, so like I'm not doing that in the
mhm,
back as
yeah,
easily as the front.
oh totally,
And
right? It's
and
just
but that's an example. Like I think your point was that the value is there. There's all of our ends are different based on value. It's
yep,
subjective. It's like, where
mhm.
are we at in our life? What's important to us? And here I have a question for you. Right here, I
Well,
want to turn
real
the
for
conversation.
wait,
Or go ahead. Yeah.
put a pin in that question, because you made a very important point, right? Is what, and this is something that we completely gloss over in the industry, is that it's subjective because what's important to them, right? If you want to win in sales and marketing, like, you're not the hero. What you think and want to talk about, all that shit doesn't matter. All the only thing that matters,
Yeah, you're right.
because again, I'm not generating my own revenue, meaning the money's not coming out of my pocket and into my bank, like collectively, is that if the audience I'm trying to reach, I don't speak to what's important to them, to their perspective, to what's subjective to them and their opinion, not mine, them, then I'm not going to make money. I'm not going to do revenue. Right. And so that's what I'm talking. You just summed it up in a little bit cleaner, but like, that's what we're talking about. Right. And from a marketing and sales perspective, that's all that matters. I don't care about anything else. I don't even care if I'm wrong. Right. Or right. All I care about is that I get them what they want based off of their needs, or what they have put a premium on as being important or valuable to them. So I just wanted to make sure
I
that people
love, yeah,
understood.
that's.
Yeah. Wait. Yeah. So.
How about this? So if demand is higher,
Mhm.
if demand is there, it would think people are coming at a higher likelihood to us. If there's less supply and high demand, and we're salespeople,
Mhm.
we're reacting to opportunity
Yeah.
at a higher rate than if there's less demand. Um, eh, Less demand, and even if what if there's less demand and also less supply? Isn't that kind of
Mhm.
where things are at today versus a handful of years ago? There'd be more demand and what,
So
still
yeah,
lower supply?
so the difference, here's the difference. I mean, conceptually correct. The difference between what's happening now, and this is exactly why I'm trying to tell people, saying this is not the market you guys have ever gone through, right? And nor have I. However, I've seen, again, I look at things differently. And but because I don't look, again, I look at it from a lens of not like what can we do that we've always done. I look at like, how do we meet what's happening now? How do we create our own market? The point is or the with what you said, is that demand is still really high, but demand only ever matters if it also creates action. And so what we have is we don't have any lack of demand right now. We have a lack of action, right? And this is something I've been talking about all year, right? And so the problem is, so the thing is that when you understand that demand's there, that's problem number one. That's a hurdle or challenge that you don't have to overcome. It's there already. What's the problem is like, how do I get them to take action? Right. Then, and the only way to do that is to talk or press the pressure points of what matters to them and why they're even thinking about it. Now, again, within reason. And what I mean by that is that you're not trying to create action from people that shouldn't own a house right now, right? Or ever, based off of who they are, because you don't want to try to put someone in a bad financial situation. But through me just doing what I do, looking at data, talking with people, all that other stuff, is that there's people that aren't taking action that absolutely can afford to buy, absolutely could afford the mortgage rate, could absolutely do everything that they want to do and live the life that they want to live, but they're so caught on one little piece. So you have to figure out what the pressure point or how to overcome what's stop it, the blocker, to get them what they've already said that they've wanted. You know what I mean? So the demand is there. You just have to figure out how to create action. And you're only
Is
going
it, would
back to
this
what we
be
just said
correct?
previously.
In the
Yep.
past or in the handful of years ago, the consumer may have been reaching out to it may have, there may have been coming to
Mm-hmm.
now, whereas now we might have to go to them more, but there's also the psychological element for the salesperson where they might not only were they used to reacting to someone coming to them, now they've got to proact, they've got to go to
Mm-hmm.
them. They might not believe in going to them because they are so caught up on the rate.
Oh, absolutely.
So there's two factors in encumbering or disempowering the advisors, the salespeople, the originating, the originators. One
Mhm.
being when people were coming to them, that would condition one to be used to responding, responsibility, right? They're responding to people coming to them. Now, if there's the demands there, the desires there, but maybe they're not coming to them. They're like hoping they call. When I say they, I mean the
Yeah.
consumer.
Mhm.
So now the salesperson has to go to them, but I think what you're saying that the salesperson's less likely to go to them if they're not believing in their own
Mhm.
value. If the
Oh yeah,
salesperson is
absolutely.
convinced of the rate being almost like, well, I'm going to wait till the rate goes down to call.
Exactly.
Okay, I want to make sure
Well,
I'm
and that's
following, I'm tracking you.
oh
Like
no,
there's
no,
two
you're
big
you're
elements.
you're 100%. Yeah, you're 100% right. And I see that in the conversation and the talk tracks all the time, and almost that self-limiting mindset of themselves is like, because I see the posts in Facebook groups of like, well, rates are down, so what am I, I'm going to do this, or I'm not going to talk about this, I'm not communicating with my clients because of rates of this and that. And it's just like, I like, I don't get it. I mean,
So
I get it,
interesting.
but I
It's like
don't
a
get
case
it.
study.
Right.
Well,
It
it's
is.
like a giant psychological case study because if you think
Yeah.
about it, you have a whole generation of people that have been, let's say I'm really responsible, like I'm the best value adder ever.
Hmm.
But I've been doing that within a context of people maybe coming to me or being
Hmm.
referred to me. And that had some kind of relationship with just the money become, being cheaper and cheaper and cheaper and cheaper.
Yep.
Now the money's all of a sudden hot, like perceivably much higher and
Hmm.
it like higher. I might not know even how to function. It just goes back to what you said earlier. The new people are doing better. They
Yeah.
don't have any conditioning. They haven't been it's like that experiment with the rats. Oh, maybe I shouldn't say that in the show. Rats and human, there's like
No,
um
no,
like
it's
if
the same. It's the same thing. It's the same thing.
there's a study that done they did where if you feed a dog, if you punch a dog in the nose. See, this also doesn't make me look very good. Like, but if you hit a dog in the nose every time it goes to try to eat out of its bowl, 40
Yeah.
days in a row, it'll starve itself
Yeah.
because you're conditioning it to be afraid of eating.
Yeah. And that's what I was talking about earlier is that there's no, I wouldn't say bad habits, but there's no like and I like to call it dogma because that to me is just the best descriptor for me. It's like there's nothing there that's holding them back. You know what I mean? Like there's nothing there for them to latch onto to not move forward and do because they don't know any different, right? Like kind of like what you said is like when you don't know any different, like if I'm not trained or I have no experience doing something and I walk into a situation that other people have had experience doing and they're like, whoa, like then they're like, oh, but you know, hey, I'm just going in because I don't know any better, right? And that's like with a lot of these new people is they just don't know any better, so they're willing to take risks. They
It's
may
like
not
the
perceive them as
immigrant
risks,
mentality.
right? Right, like because they just have there's no choice. You know what I mean? Like whereas other and this is what's crazy to me, right? I see all these posts about buying leads and all these other crap, and it's like guys, like there's so many people out there that don't pay anything. They don't even go after agents. They
Mhm.
just go and do what they do, and which is create content focused on the questions and the needs of the audience at large. And they get, you know, one of the highest producing loan officers in the country does this stuff, right? And I've done webinars. I've showed the
Mm.
blueprint. I've said, and I said, guys, look, the thing is that when and they're like, well, show me someone that's doing it. Okay, well, show me another person. It's like I don't need to show you if it works for this person, it's going to work for you. And the reason why I can't show you a lot of people is because loan officers aren't willing to do it because it's a lot of work, right? But that's going to be the new thing. And this is what I tell them. I said, look, like if you do these things, it's going to transform your damn life. But you just have to be willing to do it. But instead, they're not willing to put in the time. They're not willing to put in the effort. And then in 60 days, they're like, all right, well, where can I buy like, you know, cheap and free and easy leads and all this other stuff? And they just don't need to do it. But they don't know how to get business or leads any other way than what they've already taught. Yet like I mentioned, I got these newbies that don't buy, pay for nothing, don't even go after agents. They just are doing what they just know how to do and they're getting business. And so that's the thing. Like, you know, it's yeah, they're getting punched in the nose. Not the newbies, but the older ones. It's like, hey, call agents every Monday, call agents every Monday, call agents every Monday, call every eight. And then if they don't call agents, I'm not getting business. So they're starving themselves together, right? That's the punch in the nose.
Mm.
And when that, you know what I mean? So like they're not doing it. And so, um, you know, at the end of the day, you just got to figure out like, am I willing to be different? Am I willing to do anything? And, or anything that's outside of my comfort zone? If the answer is no, then you're going to have a tough time. Right now, I try not to be an absolutist, you know, and come from like a binary perspective of saying it's going to be like, you know, pass or fail. But I'll tell you, you know, the conversations I'm having, the struggle that I'm or the people that I'm talking with that are struggling, it's it the only thing that's in their way is themselves, right? That's it. They're talking themselves out of success every single day with their limiting beliefs, with their bad mindset, with all this stuff. And nothing that I'm mentioning costs money, by the way, right? Like you could just go out and do it, and it's amazing to me, you know what I mean? It's one of those things like I mentioned, right? It's like it's possible to be amazed but at the same time not surprised, you know what I mean? Like because I've been in this industry long enough, it doesn't surprise me, but still at this time I thought there would be enough pain. I thought there would really be enough pain in these people that are getting into like bad situations. Like I've chipped in to help loan officers pay their mortgage, right? You know, that have been in bad times, and it's like they let themselves get into these bad areas. And, you know, it's just like, don't wait till your back's up against the wall because that's when you're going to make your bad decisions, right? Like that's when
What
things aren't
percentage
going to
do you
happen
think
quick
are
enough.
working like what percentage of people you're, you know, a tertiary, but also like within proximity you're working with or around are really putting in the sweat and have been for the last year to kind of catch the wave, right? If there's a wave and we're surfing,
I'd I'd
you
say
got to paddle
I'd say
far out enough and fast enough to catch the wave. Like, what percentage do you think are catching the wave?
I would say I think I'm being probably a little generous, but I'd say about 10%. I'd if I had like a gun to my head, I'd probably say 8%, right? At large in the
Wow.
industry, probably that. And
See, I'm of the belief that it's the relationships that we cultivate when we're swimming out. If there's this giant wave that didn't yet It'd be nice if I knew things about surfing to use an analogy like this, but
Break.
we're not. Is that, yeah? Like it hasn't, but
I
we're
think, yeah.
that 8% are swimming towards the wave. That 92%, some of them have already drowned. A lot of them are kind of just sitting, waiting, looking.
Oh yeah. They're waiting for the perfect wave. Right.
And
And this is something
there's
that,
8% swimming towards it.
yeah, because they're going to make their own break. Right. You know what I mean? They're going to do that. And this is something that I've been talking about this last few months on my growth notes is that there's one of the things that's going to stop a lot of people that happens, and I think it's more of a crutch and an excuse than anything else, is people are waiting for things to be perfect as opposed to striving for perfection. Now, when you hear me say that, some
I'm
some
terrible. Yeah, I
so,
guess so.
some people won't understand what I'm saying or think they're the same, and it's not. Because here's the difference. When you're waiting for things to be perfect, when you're waiting for conditions to be perfect, and by the way, just a quick pro tip, conditions are never perfect. You learn that in Arte, you learn that in 75 Hard, right? Conditions are never perfect. So when you wait for things to be perfect, you will not be in motion. You will stand stagnant, you will stand status quo, and you will not take action because you are waiting for something that you do not control to create conditions to where you feel comfortable. Striving perfection, you can't strive for perfection if you're not in motion and if you're not taking action. Striving perfection means that you're trying to be perfect and the best at what you are doing. That's the difference between striving for perfection
Working.
and waiting for things to be perfect. Right. And one of the things, and this honestly, this when I did this growth note, it was probably one of my most feedback and talked about growth notes that
Oh,
I
wow.
did was when I is that waiting for things to be perfect will be your undoing. Waiting for things to be perfect is when you're going to lose, and you might even lose your career because it's like me waiting to like leave and go home for when the weather conditions are absolutely perfect, meaning like no wind, no rain, no cloud. I want perfect visibility, right? It's not going to happen, or it may happen for 15 minutes or whatever, but otherwise I'm just going to sit in my house and die. You know what I mean? And so like it may be like an extreme analogy, but it's true, right? And so when you are waiting for things to be perfect, right? And again, I think a lot of people are, oh, I'm a perfectionist and blah blah blah, and it's like, yeah, okay, like it sounds cool, but like that's not what it is. The problem is that
Perfectionists are
you're
a
waiting
coward.
for things to be perfect within your scale of being comfortable, and that is the reason, because you don't want to take risks, you don't want to be bold, you don't want to do anything outside of what you've always done.
I laughed earlier because I think about 80 podcasts recordings ago, the Jenna ordered me a mic,
Mm-hmm.
and it's definitely in the living room downstairs. Like, I
Well,
do care
and
about the
that's a great
quality of this
example. You,
show. No, I'd rather do the episodes and meet with you. I do care
yeah.
about the quality. Like, I think I mean, the sound doesn't seem too bad. I listened to it. Like,
Hmm.
it'll improve. We'll improve, but I'm definitely more interested on having the conversation than
Right. Right. You're more,
I'm.
the
This show is
substance.
still on my laptop, and
Right.
I do have an aspiring belief and a hope, like a desire for a studio someday, or
Hmm.
like most of the time I'm doing these shows in different states, different places. Maybe I'm home, I'm in a hotel. I
Yeah.
don't know, and I don't know if it's going to be that beautiful. And sometimes I'm insecure about like, oh, I wonder, I've got, it's not really that great of a background, if
Hmm.
people are watching us on YouTube. Like, there's a lot of things I think about that give me doubt around the show or the
Yeah.
feedback I've gotten from people that admire what we're trying to do. Like,
Hmm.
hey, why don't you have a studio, or even a mic could be nice. Like, you have a great
Hmm.
mic. You sound great. I don't know. I just
Well,
that's
thank
why
you.
I laughed earlier. I was like,
Well,
yeah,
and that's a perfect example, because if you waited for things to be perfect, we wouldn't be having the conversation, right? Because you don't have your perfect background, you don't have your perfect mic, you don't have the perfect light. You know what I mean? Like, but is the value of the topic and the subject and the content good?
And
The
the light
fan,
started to
the
dim
light,
this week.
yeah, exactly right. So
And I'm
like
laughing
that's
because one time Brad was making fun of me about something. It was like you know you're sitting there in that room with your dim light, and it's like now I actually do have a. At the time, I didn't have a dim light. At the
yeah,
time,
yeah,
now I do. It's hilarious.
yeah,
But we just yeah we wouldn't be having the conversation.
yeah,
Hey, in
right.
closing, I want your opinion on the podcast community and how it's evolved over the last couple of years. What do you think as a medium? What have you seen work for various influencers and subject matter experts? What do you see hasn't? What's your take on all that? Are people
Yeah, I
listening more to
think
them that you're around?
y- you know what I see uh changed from when, like when we really started like to hit podcasting hard, especially in our industry over these last, I don't know, what are we, 2025 almost, right? So I'd say like the last 7 years is the more that this moves to like YouTube. You know what I mean? Like, so like I see more podcasts and more, instead of just being audio, I see it migrating to more video consumption,
Hmm.
which was always going to be the case at some point. Audio is obviously a little easier for like driving in cars and stuff like that. So what I would say is I think whereas before like podcast was more of a premium on the audio side of it, and like maybe we'll do a YouTube channel or maybe we'll do, now I see people completely just moving, calling it a podcast, and they really don't even do audio. They just are just on YouTube, right? Like they just, and that's their podcast. And so I see that probably be the biggest change. And complementary to that is that people are putting a premium, and maybe even more premium on the video than the audio, but at least it's equal. Whereas before it was more like audio. How do I be on Apple Podcasts? And then maybe I'll do YouTube or something like that. And now people are just like, some people have just completely migrated to YouTube for their podcast, right? And that's really where the consumption takes place because people like to watch, the video. So that's what I would say the biggest change. I don't think it's gone away at all, right? I think just looking at what people are doing and seeing it, where I would say is that the medium has changed a bit from just audio. I listen to podcasts every single day. But I do find myself consuming more on the video side of things. But I like having background noise, and I listen to podcasts when I'm working at stuff when I can't watch a video, right? But I'll tell you what I have done is I've had to have my phone on YouTube and play something and listen to it while I'm doing my workout or whatever because they don't have an audio version, right? And so that's where I would say like the biggest change that I've seen
Hmm.
these last 7 years is more of the medium being more important on the video side for podcasting than the audio.
What
Audio
is
only,
any
what I mean
shows
by
you
that.
recommend are for our listeners?
Um, I would say yeah, I could say is, well, I mean, you mentioned Brad earlier, so dropping bombs, that's a great one. Um, but Hermosi's podcast, I can't remember the name of it. It just comes up in my queue, so
I
like I
think
don't
that's
pay
the
attention to the
game.
name. The game, yeah, that's what I was gonna say. But like, so Hermosi's is good. Gary, Vaynerchuk is always good. Um, Andy Frisella, when he finally, launches his the MFCEO podcast, which he's talked about doing again. Like that will be a good one. I love Andy to death. But like I just get worn out talking about, just like like the broken system and stuff like that. It's just, at the end of the day, like what feeds my brain more is
Yeah, yeah.
business, marketing, sales, mindset, that type of stuff, because it also helps me play into my role as a coach, and helping others. So I try to block that out. But like I would say for me, and I don't know if I would say that salespeople are the listeners, your audience, and I don't know who makes up your audience, but I'll just guess it's predominantly a lot of people in our industry, all over the place in housing maybe. But like I would say, Hermosi, Gary V, uh, I listen to a lot of marketing podcasts that I don't think would resonate well with because it's more geeky stuff, marketing stuff that than people, but like social media, what is it? Social media examiner
Hmm.
is the company. I can't remember the name of their podcast, but it's this like social media marketing, I think, or something like that. But that's a good podcast. But and I don't really listen to too many industry podcasts unless there's like someone on that I know. But but yeah, that's
Are
the
there any
podcast
in the
stuff.
industry that are really popular?
In our industry, I would
Hmm.
say the Loan Officer podcast is probably the one that's the most popular one is the Loan Officer podcast. And I don't know the guy's name. His first name's Dustin, I think, but I can't
Oh,
remember his last name. He's out, I believe he's out of Florida. But he seems to be have a popular show. I've listened to a couple episodes in the past. He seems to know his stuff, but I just don't listen to too many industry podcasts like I used to. It for various reasons, but like it just I focus more on like business because I'll be honest with you. The reason why I don't listen to most industry podcasts is because they're lame. They're just the content is the same. It's the and it's mostly the people that like you see at events that are like were cool 10 years ago and they're talking about the same stuff and the same tactics and whatnot. So the content is and you know, I'm sure I'll get a couple, you know, chewies from calling them lame, but like look, at the end of the day, like I'm of a belief and I'll die on this hill is that like the biggest problem with our industry in regards to why so many loan officers have quit and so many loaners went out of business is the adherence to the status quo. And I think a lot of industry podcasts out there just have a lot of content that just doesn't resonate with people. And this isn't just my opinion. This is I get this, you know, these questions from loan officers all the time. And,
hmm.
you know, and or they'll give me feedback on something they heard and I'll be like, I didn't see it, but that sounds about right. You know,
You have an
and there's
upcoming
a lot of
event.
agendas out there. You know, there's a lot of agendas that it's under the guise of value or providing help when it's really just a feeder into getting them to buy shit. So,
Yeah, that I've got a lot of disdain for sure. Um, you have an event coming up,
yep.
right? Correct. Where is that? What is it? How can people contribute? Participate?
Well, my Venmo, no, I'm just kidding. No, if they want to contribute. No, so we have our high performance mastermind. We are 2020 Vision for Success, where I'm the chief growth officer and executive growth coach. Um, we are basically taking the principles of Christine's new book, High, that comes out on November 14th. So guys, go ahead and pre-order that on Amazon. But and but she basically takes her whole career and the lessons of working with some of the highest performers in the industry, and she you know highlights them in the book. But there's some great principles within this book, um and we're taking that to evolve vision in our coaching structure and what we provide based off of these principles, because I think it's the right time. It's the right content at the right time. And so we had our masterminds that we called the Difference Maker Mastermind. You spoke at the one in Boston. And so we were having one in Scottsdale. And so as we were making this evolution, that's going to begin in January, by the way, we're making like the big announcement. You guys are actually getting kind of like a preview of that, but we're making the big announcement and the structure in Scottsdale on December 10th at the mastermind. But that's how we're going to evolve, is based off of these principles. Now with that, the mastermind is an actual mastermind. Most people in our industry have never been to a mastermind. They think they have because the name mastermind was in the title,
Sure.
but a mastermind is a group of people talking about topics, right? Like at
I
its very bare,
love it.
at the very
The general mastermind cliche to me is show up so I can pitch you.
exactly, right? Like that's really what these things are, and especially in our industry. This is a
Meaning,
true
I'm going to be
mastermind.
your master. Now pay me.
Yeah, now pay me, right? And that's not what this is. This is we've brought
Mm.
13, if you count me, 13 people in the industry, high performers, some of the best operators in the business together for a 1 day mastermind where it's workshop style, meaning each expert gets 30 minutes. In some cases, we have two people at the same time, so so they get like 45. But the whole point of that session is for someone to learn and have a takeaway and be able to put it apply it in their business. If they can't do that in the 30 minutes, then they can't talk about it. So every single one of our, and we have a lot of great speakers, industry leaders, CEOs, like we have great people in this room. We're talking tens of thousands of units, billions in volume done collectively, years experience and expertise in this industry, decades, right, is what we're talking about together, workshop style, young and older, right, veterans like myself, right, and some of the young newer blood, all collectively with the right mindset. And we're talking about high performance and selling, high performance marketing, accountability, mindset, recruiting, all the things that are going to be the pillars of growth in this industry in next year and going forward. That's what this mastermind is. And it's going to be limited. It's a private event, limited seating, because we want this to be a very involved personal experience. And so if you don't want to show up to learn, to work, and to win, then this mastermind's not for you. And if you're okay with the way things are going, then continue to do what you do. But if you truly want to make 2025 the start of the transformation for the best career that you've ever had, then come to this mastermind, because you're going to learn, and you're going to 10x your ROI that you spend, because it's impossible. It is an impossibility. Should you put anything, because we have 13 sessions, right? Should you put anything into play, right, you will do more loans. And it pays for yourself, right? And for the people that are not members of Vision yet, they're getting a free month of coaching just to see what this new high performance structure is all about. So like you literally have nothing to lose, everything to gain. But just like everything else in the industry, and I get it, because there's a lot of times where people pay to go to an event and it's really just kind of a lame keynote of like, hey, send me your loans or buy my CRM or blah, 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 blah. Like you said, pitch me, like, here, come. Now let me pitch you on some stuff. Like there's no selling at all in this event. And it's, like we're not even selling anything, right? Like, I mean, we obviously hope people will come, and the people that are going to contribute and stuff like that, they hope whatever, but there's no like pitch in your face. There's no vendor tables. There's none of that stuff, right? It's all about coming together, learning, and whoever's going to be a part of it will be a part of it. And this is again, part of what I want to do in this industry, is to make an impact, is to leave a legacy of change and of being different, because ultimately my existence, my survival is based off of loan originators being relevant, right? And I'm not going to sit there and let them make themselves irrelevant to the consumer and to the market. And that's unfortunately what a lot have been okay doing. And for those that want to endure and want to transform and create something amazing for themselves, because this is the industry to do it in, that's who I'm here for.
How can people reach out to you to get a ticket?
Yeah, so they could just email me at Frazier at visionyoursuccess.net, or you could find me on social media. Instagram is probably, I'm starting to focus a little bit more on Instagram than any other channel, and that is at the real CMO, is my handle there. And again, just email. I'm not hard to find. If you Google my name or whatever, you'll find a million different ways to connect with me. But that's it.
My man, thanks for coming back to the show. If you're listening to this, reach out to Jason. Take a look at that event. You're not going to want to miss it. Please leave us a review on the Culture Matters podcast, and we will see you next time. Thanks, brother.